do they opt to maybe bring him back at a long-term deal as opposed to Barr? So I think there are some tough decisions. Trey Waynes is potentially a free agent coming up, I believe, and so I would not be surprised. I think that I tend to agree with you. I think he doesn't make as many plays as we would like to see. There are some games where he really jumps out at you, and I think it was the Jets game this year, one of the games that he really had a good game, but there are too many games where he just doesn't make enough plays, and especially for a $12 million a year linebacker this year as a franchise player. So I think that would not surprise me, and I definitely agree with you on Adam Thielen, even though in full disclosure, I have to say that my agent group that I work with represents Adam, but even aside from that, I will actually speak objectively and say, as a former GM, this is a guy who's a Minnesota native, who's a success story here, a Horatio Alger story, and if you've paid Diggs, who tends to miss about 2-3 games a year, Adam's always on the field, knock on wood for him, but yeah, I have a hard time seeing them not doing what they need to do to bring Thielen up to a very significant elite wide receiver level salary.
Absolutely. And the other thing I was going to play off that you said about earlier is I understand. I don't disagree with what you're saying about Zimmer and Spielman. You know, the team has built a very talented roster. They have been in the playoffs. But if there's a but, it's that if they didn't make the playoffs this year, or if they made the playoffs and lost in their first game, you'd still be looking at a duo that had produced only one playoff win so far, and it really had only one playoff win since Brett Favre was here in 2009. And as a former executive, how much do you allow that to affect your decision making?
Yeah, I think it's certainly something that the ownership is going to look at record wise, but I think they're also going to look at where is this team headed, and was this a year with the new quarterback, with the new offensive coordinator, and all the things the changes that have been made. So I think that, yeah, you definitely want to see more success in the postseason, but this is also a year where they had a tougher schedule, much tougher schedule, and a year where it's going to be a good achievement to get to the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Once you get there, you're going to run into some really good teams in the Saints and the Rams, and not to say they can't beat them, but there's a good chance they'll be on the road. And so I think it's very challenging, and I think if they don't win a playoff game, if perhaps they win the first round, the wild card round, if they're a third seed, for example, and then they run into the Rams or the Saints, mm-hmm. That's going to be a big challenge now. Not to say they can't beat those teams. They've beaten them before. They had chances to beat them this year in the games they lost to them. The Rams could be weakened if Cooper Kupp is out for the year with an ACL.
Sounds like he is. Yep.
Which it sounds like he is. And so that really, as we said, takes that offense down a notch. They've still got Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods and Todd Gurley and Jared Goff, but still, that's a really big weapon for them. And as far as the Saints, they've been pretty healthy this year. So who's to say that something doesn't happen to them, that they lose some of their key guys? So, and just the fact that they're trying to bring in a Brandon Marshall or a Dez Bryant means that they're not great at wide receiver.
Right, no question. They really do lack depth.
Yes, exactly. And other than Michael Thomas, who's a boot chip guy, so these teams can be beaten. When you get to the postseason, anything can happen, and especially if the Vikings are on a high defensively at that point, really compared to last year in the postseason when they didn't play great defensively.
Right, absolutely. When you listen to our shows across the network, you can go to talknorth.com to find all the shows, or subscribe at iTunes, your favorite podcast app, or just follow us on social media to get the links that we send out. Please download before you listen. It's a better listening experience. You're not subject to Wi-Fi and things going in and out. It's also better for us, so we would appreciate it. And also, if you hear this in time, Monday night we are doing a show at Twill in the Edina Galleria, sponsor of the Viking Update Show. We're going to do the Viking Update Show with Tim Yoder, 5:30 at Twill in the Edina Galleria. It's a nice place to walk around. Scott Dayton has a nice shop there. Just drop by and say hello. We'd appreciate it. So what do you make of the Packers right now? They got the running game going. Aaron Jones is very dynamic. The defense played well against a suspect Dolphins team. Is this really a contending team in your eyes?
I think they're a little shaky, and I think they're potentially a good team. Anytime you have Aaron Rodgers, for sure, and now Aaron Jones rushes for 145 yesterday and 2 touchdowns. But the Dolphins really self-destructed in that game. The first drive, they're roaring down the field. They fumble a snap or a bad snap from center, and Brock Osweiler is not going to get it done, and 4 field goals aren't going to get it done. And so, but the Packers still had a good day defensively. They did also have a couple of starters defensively get hurt, and Nick Perry and Kentrell Bryce. We'll see how that carries forward the next couple of weeks, especially with the Vikings facing them next 2 weeks from now. And so I think the Packers, to me, are a notch below the Bears, especially with the Bears' schedule and the Vikings in the division. And I don't see them as a postseason team. And so, but that can change with Rodgers and as he can get hot, as we know, down the stretch, that could definitely happen. So Jim, I always like to, I'm heading actually to Nashville this week.
Ooh.
And even though I was hoping for better weather down there, because I go and speak at Vanderbilt several times a year, and it's only going to be in the 40s there. So I was hoping it'd be like 60s or 70s there.
I was in Mississippi this last weekend visiting family, and it was not that warm. And it's really disappointing when you travel south in the winters of Minnesota and it's not that warm.
No, that's right. So I'm not going to get the benefit of nice weather, but I will be speaking to the Vanderbilt MBA students on negotiation, which I always like to do. And I always like to share some of my negotiation stories with you and our listeners.
Yeah.
And as I'm heading south, I always think about David Palmer. You remember David Palmer was a second-round draft pick out of Alabama. And
what was his nickname? Deuce?
Deuce, because he was 22. I think 2 was his number at Alabama, and then 22 was his number with the Vikings. So, and a really good guy. I saw him at the reunion of the '98 team, and he was had a nice role on that team as a kick returner and kind of a fourth receiver in that group, and was a good player. But his rookie year, his agent was a city councilman from Birmingham, who was a friend of the family, which I always dreaded negotiating those kind of deals with those type of agents personally, because they didn't understand the system and they were very nervous about making a deal. And so I would always prefer to work with the most professional agents in the league, the CAAs of the world, the Tom Condons and Lee Steinbergs and those kind of people, because they knew when a deal was right. Plus, they had so many clients, they had to get the deal done.
Yeah.
So this guy had one client. He was a friend of the family. And he's holding David Palmer out at training camp. And everybody around us is signing in the second round with the rookie scale, and there's a slotted system, and you know where the deal is supposed to be. And he can't make a deal. He is catatonic. The guy cannot get the deal done. And David Palmer is out of camp 1 week, 2 weeks. And my thing with rookies always was I wanted them in the first day of camp because I knew if they're not there and they miss time, they miss learning of the system. They invariably get hurt. And so David Palmer is sitting out. And as opposed to, we've talked about Robert Smith. I wasn't worried about Robert Smith reporting late to training camp because I knew he'd be in shape and knew the system. But so David Palmer, it's the second week. It's the third week of his holdout in training camp. And finally, I had to do something I had never done before. I had to threaten to take money off the table if he didn't show up within 24 hours, which I learned a good lesson that way. And of course, as soon as I threatened that, he was in camp 24 hours later. And I learned a valuable lesson that at that time, the next time it happened, I didn't wait till 2 weeks into training camp to make that threat. And I actually did it about the second day of training camp with rookies in the future. But so David Palmer comes in 3 weeks late, of course, pulls a hamstring in the first practice, and he's out for 4 weeks and had basically a very lackluster rookie season. So that was my David Palmer story. I learned how to use the leverage when you have the leverage, and you have to use it in a negotiation. So, but
did things ever get acrimonious between you and an agent, or was it?
Occasionally, I had a very ugly exchange when I was trading for Warren Moon. I'd made the trade for Warren Moon with the Oilers, and who became my future employer, in part because of that deal, because Bud Adams was impressed how I negotiated the trade. So anyways, we get Warren for a third and fourth round pick or something, and so we're finishing the deal, And I called Warren to say, congratulations, welcome, excited to have you come in here. The deal was done. And Jeff Morad was his agent, a big baseball agent, as you know he became, and was working with Lee Steinberg at the time.
Yep.
And since we had not formally signed the contract with Warren on his restructure to come to Minnesota, Jeff Morad just went ballistic on me and just started swearing up and down at me. How dare you call him before this deal's done? And that's so unprofessional, blah, 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 blah. I said, Jeff, the deal is done. What are you worried about? And so that was about the most acrimonious it got, because I just finally...
The funny thing is, Jeff ended up working with the Arizona Diamondbacks later.
Yes, he did.
He probably was on the the other end of those.
That's right. He became an executive in baseball. And we were fine in later years, but he just lost it at that point in time, which I thought was kind of an absurd situation. So there haven't been very many times where I had an extremely acrimonious confrontation with an agent, but that was one, the Warren Moon deal. But
what else grabs you about? Let me ask you this. I had always heard great things about John Gruden as an offensive mind and a coach. How is this happening? How it looks like he has no idea what he's doing in Oakland right now.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, and I think it starts with the team lost confidence in him as a leader and as a coach and as a quasi executive there when he trades Khalil Mack, and Khalil Mack goes to Chicago, is tearing it up and playing great, and then Amari Cooper, who's doing some good things in Dallas also. And so I think that they're just a team that looks like they've kind of quit on the coach early on, and Detroit shows a little shades of that too with what's going on, although they did try to rally yesterday a little bit. But yeah, there's definitely been some growing pains for Gruden and for Matt Patricia. There's some other coaches around the league. Todd Bowles at the Jets. The Jets have lost 4 straight, had a really ugly loss to the Bills yesterday in New York at the Meadowlands. And so I think that there are some guys that are definitely under fire, and not that Gruden is, because Gruden is not going to be released his first year into a $100 million deal. But I think that certainly there are some coaches that are under pressure, and those are a couple of the guys that we're talking about. So, but I do think that this game this week, Jim, shapes up as a really exciting game. I'm going to give you a few keys that I see for the Vikings to be successful in Chicago. I think, first of all, it's going to be a big challenge to protect Kirk Cousins. The Bears are one of the top sacking teams in the league, 30 sacks, which it ranks 5th in the league. Takeaway-wise, they're number 2 in takeaways with 24 takeaways, number 1 in the turnover ratio, plus 13. So really important to protect the ball for the Vikings. Really important to be able to run the ball decently against Chicago. I think those are keys. But I think conversely for the Bears, they need to be able to run the ball too against the Vikings, or it's going to be a tough day for Trubisky. And I think things to watch, how much pressure does Zimmer put on Trubisky? He is having a really nice season. He's ranked 10th in the league in pass efficiency at 101.6. Big improvement over last year with his new coach who's come in, Nagy. And so I think that's going to be a big question for this week. I think the pressure's on Mitch Trubisky in this game in the national TV spotlight. And so I think running game is going to be important to watch. Who can run it decently? Who can protect their quarterback? And because the Vikings are coming off a game with 10 sacks too. So if they can get after Trubisky, but he's also a dangerous runner, and they have to be careful of that. So those are some of the things I'm going to watch for this week. And I think that it's really, as I said, a pivotal game in the Viking season.
Let's get a final thought from Jeff. Again, thanks to White Bear Lake Superstore, whitebearlakesuperstore.com. Again, download before you listen. Find all the shows at talknorth.com. If you'd like to sponsor this program or any of the other across the network, you can reach me at jsouhan47@gmail.com. Final thought, Jeff.
Well, I wanted to say congratulations to Alan Page, who is getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom this Friday at a ceremony, and it's well-deserved for everything he's accomplished. And I was privileged to be able to be part of his initial Page Foundation board back in my Viking years, and he's done so many great things for young college students, kids coming up in terms of scholarship opportunities. and so and of course his career, football and post football,